The release of downloadable content packages is still one of the most discussed issues within modern gaming. While many gamers would likely be more than happy to pay an extra amount to get extra content out of their favorite games, it seems that the actual content gamers are paying for is proving to be a bone of contention. Whether it be because the content offered in a DLC package is superfluous and unnecessary, or because the game itself is made to feel unfinished without the additions, gamers are rapidly becoming disillusioned with modern game developers. Since DLC is likely to continue to be a sore point for many gamers in 2015, we thought it was time to take a look back at the mistakes of last year. Here we have a handy list of 5 of 2014's worst value DLC packages. If you haven't shelled out your cash for these yet, don't. And if you have, well, let's hope it's a lesson learned for future endeavors. Outlast is a game that's achieved a cult status since its release, as a game that would feature as one of the scariest of all time for some, and one that will have brought the horror genre back to the forefront of many gamers' minds. The chance to dive back in for more gruesome scares was an exciting one. Unfortunately, Whistleblower really does nothing to enhance the reputation of its parent title. While the 2 hours of additional gameplay add 1 or 2 interesting tidbits to the original story, the whole thing just kind of feels ultimately unnecessary. It is refreshing that this wasn't another example of an essential chunk of gameplay being held back into a premium DLC, but content for content's sake is not a good reason for expansion. The lack of value to be found with this package is probably due in part to the fact that many would have picked up the original for free through a subscription service, but it's still hard to justify it. We certainly don't want the scariest thing about Outlast to be how quickly its reputation was tarnished by poor DLC.
To make you believe.
As Battlefield 4's 5th and, you guessed it, final DLC expansion, it was always going to be kind of a difficult addition to get right. The Final Stand takes the action of the now year-old Battlefield 4 into icy landscapes for a chilly challenge. As with most modern DLC packages, the Final Stand feels an awful lot like dressing an old body in a new skin. The 4 new areas offer different challenges depending on how you're playing the game, but each one has its limitations and they tend to shoehorn players down one path. The advanced vehicles and weaponry don't really feel any different to those of the game's origin either, and do very little to make this feel like a particularly advanced experience. Given what little this package adds to the experience, it seems mighty difficult to justify spending the $15 on minimal extra content for a game that's already feeling very dated just a year down the line. Even more worrying is what Battlefield's struggle to remain relevant and competitive with other first-person shooters suggests for the future of expansion-heavy games like Destiny, but we'll have more on that one later. Amongst 2014's new generation releases, it's easy to forget that there was still new content hitting the old market. In some cases, players who stuck with their old consoles and titles got to experience a last few memorable moments with their faithful machines. In many others, however, the gulf in quality was starting to show. Batman Arkham Origins is widely known to have been the worst received of the popular Arkham series. While it was by no means a bad game, it didn't live up to the high standards set by its predecessors. Adding paid DLC to a title like this would always be a kind of a risky move. It could either add some polish and creativity to a game sorely in need of it, or simply suffer the same criticisms heightened by the fact that players will have had to pay for it again. Cold Hearts falls into the second category. Its developers tried hard to convince players that the extra adventure featuring Mr. Freeze was worth diving into, but players will have found the experience frustrating. Arkham City's showdown with Mr. Freeze was inventive, exciting, and truly memorable. While there's more build-up in this package, the conflict can't quite match the intensity players found in Arkham City, and is simply not worth the money, especially when you can probably pick up an old copy of Arkham City for the same amount these days. There's one thing that can always be said of any title in the Call of Duty series. Its developers sure do try damn near everything to keep it relevant right up to the last minute. With the final expansion for last year's Call of Duty Ghosts coming just 2 months before the release of its next full title, it's easy to see how easily we can be duped into continuing to shell out more money on old games. The expansion would have cost around $15 on its own, or would have initially set players back $50 for the season pass. This means that to complete the full experience could have set the game's players back a staggering $65. While it's true that adding variety to the online experience of a game with such a huge multiplayer community is essential, it just doesn't seem that there's any justification given how other titles can offer just as much within one release. This type of DLC release schedule is pretty much exactly what's wrong with modern gaming. It's the fear of being left behind for even just a month or two that drives players to dip back into their wallets, and the heads of franchises like Call of Duty know just how to exploit that. Dishonor on you. Dishonor. Destiny was easily one of the most hyped games within the first yearly cycle of the new generation of console gaming. Whilst many reviews of the game suggests that it was somewhat of a disappointment, this was probably inevitable given the wave of anticipation that the game rode in on. That being said, Destiny would have made many gamers essential lists for 2014 for its virtually seamless blend of single and multiplayer elements. With a story that remained large and open enough at the end of the main game, DLC was inevitable. December brought the game's first expansion, The Dark Below, onto the market, but it again failed to be much of a hit. The Dark Below comes at a pretty hefty price, a full $19.99 if purchased on its own, and it really doesn't do much to justify that. The few extra missions and maps don't offer anything new in terms of gameplay, it's just a new mask worn by the same mechanic. What's perhaps most frustrating about this expansion is the underhand exclusives that it offers players who opt in. Players with the expansion have access to better weapons and a higher level cap, meaning they can instantly gain an advantage over players without. It's a case of being damned if you do, damned if you don't as far as Destiny's DLC is concerned. Not cool, Bungie. More dishonor.